Hey, welcome back, parents. Listen, today is our first interview where we have a married couple on our show talking about family life and what it's like to work together too. So, welcome to the show, Kurt and Kristen Luidhardt.
Woohoo!
Yeah, happy to be here.
This is so awesome. You guys, I met Kurt just over a month ago when a mutual contact of ours introduced us. So shout out to Kyle Gray, the storytelling genius, great coach that I've used. And anyway, Kyle introduced us. And so we just jumped on a video chat together like you do when you're meeting someone to see if you have some connection in business or whatever. And what I learned is that Kurt is an entrepreneur, an investor, and a business leader. And together with his wife, Kristen, this couple has founded a dozen companies and profitably exited 3 of them. Okay, let me just quickly tell you guys that they have bought this little place called the Dairy Bar, the Dutchtown Dairy Bar in New Washington, Ohio. Like a childhood spot that he would frequent, has so many memories of like getting a burger and some ice cream there. And this is like his passion project. So you're going to be so blessed by this couple and what they have to talk about regarding parenting and business. This is just awesome. Okay. Real quick, I'm going to just share a little bit about your current business. So, Kristen, we'll talk about this in a second, but she kind of is Kurt's boss. Okay. So imagine this is so awesome. Kurt is the CEO and co-founder of the Prosper Group. And this is a leading digital agency in Republican politics that he and Kristen started in 2006. They have raised a crazy amount of money, over $500 million in political contributions. Yeah, high five. They're fist bumping over there. You got to watch this on YouTube if you're not already. They have gotten 1 president, 14 governors, 15 senators, and over 100 members of Congress elected for the Republican Party people. So this couple is just a total powerhouse. I can tell. This is going to be great.
Don't hold us responsible, though, for what gets done or doesn't get done.
Yeah, well, and we're working on one more governor here. Just a few months, we may have our Indiana. We're in Indiana. We may have a new Indiana governor elected. So trying to add to the list.
So awesome. Thank you for what you're doing in politics for sure. That is so helpful. One of the things we got to talking about is just the fact, Kurt, that, you guys had these businesses going, and then all of a sudden had children, right? So you're not newlyweds. How long have y'all been married?
We'll be married 20 years on August 28th.
Well done. Okay.
Yes.
Well done.
Yes. Nothing planned yet for the anniversary. So I better I got to get moving on that. But yes, 20 years.
That is awesome. Josh and I will have been married 20 years as well in September. So we're just a month behind you. You have so much wisdom on us.
Oh, well, we'll help you out.
All 30 days.
That's right. That's a whole 30 days. So 20 years married, started these businesses, are rocking it on the business front. And then along came a child or two.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it was one of those things where for early on in our marriage, we were just very focused on business and work, and we'd talk about having kids. And maybe we're like a lot of couples where one of us would say, I think I'm ready. And the other one would say, I'm not in a rush. And then we'd do that for a few months, and then we'd switch roles. And the other one would say, okay, now I'm ready. The other would say, we're not in a big rush. And I know for Kristen, and maybe I let her speak for herself, and for us both, really, I think the timing and the urgency became more acute when my father passed away, because you realize this sort of passage of time is happening, and we don't have forever, and we want our kids to meet their grandparents, and so we need to we're going to do this, let's do it.
That's
You
right.
know?
That's right.
And I remember that being a moment when we said, it's time. We should stop talking about this and have a child here.
Yes. Be intentional about this, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I know that really kind of moved us quite a bit. That was back in, 2015,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then but we only have a 4-year-old, which means our first pregnancy wasn't successful. And that was also a setback for us both. And very emotional. We took so much time to like get going on the whole idea, let's get pregnant. And then it didn't, come together. So I think that probably made it even more.
It just makes you appreciate it all the more, so for anybody who's been through that, the sweetness, there's a bitterness and then there's a sweetness, and there's never a day that I'm not just overcome with gratitude, for these 2 beautiful babies.
Yeah.
Because, it can be a challenge for some people.
So,
we went through that, but we now have a very beautiful and healthy daughter, Eliana, who turns 4 this weekend. Of course, depending on when this airs, right, she will already be 4. And then our son Gideon just recently turned 2. So life is full of adventure and never a dull moment. And I wish there are days I think, I wish I had more energy, but it is just that motivating to keep healthy and all those things so we can have all kinds of adventures with them.
Yeah. I used to say, my brother, he had his kids pretty soon after he and his wife got married. And so they have their eldest daughter is in college. And now I'm a little jealous. Like, we could have been young people with kids in college. Instead, we're 45, or at least I am, and have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old,
Yes.
So, but there's a lot of benefits to it. We had 15 years of being married we built our business. So resources were better, we're probably more mature. I can't imagine 20-year-old Kurt having a baby to take care of.
You'd have been fine. You'd have been fine.
And so there's some advantage to it too.
Sure. Life throws you curveballs. You kind of have a plan, right? And then you get going at it, and then sometimes it just takes a detour on you, and it's like, okay, now we got to recalculate and reroute and figure out how to get back on track. And it sounds like you guys have done that. You've had several businesses you've started together. 6, is that right?
Yeah, and it's probably more than that. And I was realizing while you were
some of the ones that did not.
Yeah. Maybe we 6 because we had a couple that went kablooey. But yeah, we did. We've been very entrepreneurial, and that was the biggest change when we had our kids. Was I was used to every weekend was a good time to catch up. Both of us were the kinds of people who would work late. We did it together, so it was good it wasn't bad for our marriage. I know it's a challenge when somebody's building a business and they're never home and the spouse never feels like they're around, but we were doing it together. So that was a good thing for us. And then when we had our kids, at least with the first one, it was moderately, you could kind of adjust around it,
Well, she was a COVID baby, so that helped.
So
wow. Yes.
Yeah. And so we could kind of adjust around the changes in our schedule. So if one of us needed to work more, the other one could take care of her. And then, but when we had our second, it was just for me, it was just such a thing where, man, I can't work any weekends anymore unless we pay a babysitter or send them off to their grandparents, or in the evenings I need to be available. And that was a big adjustment for me. In fact, it's become a little bit of a passion project because I found it very upsetting, and felt this like extreme loss of control. I've got this little 8-pound child that's running my life, and I didn't have any freedom to do what I wanted to do. I used to be able to, let's see, it's kind of cold here in Indiana. Why don't we work from Florida for a week? And we would just jet off to Florida or something. And now I feel like we can't go to the grocery store without having a lengthy conversation about, what are we doing with the kids? Are we bringing the kids up? We got to bring the bag. We got to have extra diapers. They're going to pee their pants, all this other stuff. And so they're just running our lives, and I feel complete total loss of control, and I'm kind of mad and resentful about it, and also feeling guilty because I thought, when I talk to other guys, they all say, oh, you're going to have kids. If it's a daughter, you're just going to, in the hospital, you're just going to fall in love with her. You're going to look in her eyes and your life will never be the same. And of course, there was a lot of that, but there was also a lot of, well, I'm just kind of pissed because I'm not running anything anymore. And it's these kids' fault. And I'm mad and resentful about it, but I also feel guilty. And I thought I'm the only human being that's ever felt this way. And because nobody shared that they may have felt this way. And I tried to explain this to Kristen, and which she looks at me like this is crazy because she's loving every minute of it, just wanting to hold the baby and do all the mom stuff. And it wasn't.
I know your heart.
Yeah.
And so, like, if I was listening to this, I think, man, what a jerk here.
Yeah.
But Kurt is Mr. like tender sweetheart, so when he was going through that, I knew, okay, this is something to really pay attention to. And I won't steal your thunder, but of course you discovered that actually a lot of men go through that early on. It's just not talked about as much.
Yeah. I finally started asking guys who had kids, is this normal? And I found I've only actually talked to one right now, and this is completely unscientific. So it's probably some, psychologist saying, you're making this up or something. But I was there was only one guy who said he didn't feel the same way. And all of them, same thing, felt some sense of loss of control, some resentment, didn't feel like they could talk to anybody about it, thought they were the only one. And so now it's my thing. Kristen kind of, when we meet a couple and they're about to have kids, I'm like, okay, I'm going to take the guy aside. I'm going to warn you. And I've had several come up later and say, boy, thank you for telling me this because it didn't hit me right away. But about a month in, I'm feeling like this. I just want to get away. Nobody wants to talk to me about it because everybody's there to see the new baby and to see my wife who's also gone through all sorts of, physical and emotional trauma to have a baby. And I'm just suffering alone. And so I found that was I think a more common thing, right? And that was a big adjustment. It may also have been bigger for us because we were 15 years married before we even started talking seriously about having kids. So we were also super adjusted to freedom and ways. Yeah. It wasn't like we got married and immediately started having kids. So you sort of deal with all those changes at once. I was, maybe a little stubborn and set in my freedom. And maybe a 22-year-old recently married person wouldn't feel that way, but that was a big moment for me. And we're talking about it lightly, but it was probably one of the most, I would have, in 45 years of life, I probably never would have said I ever felt depressed. Maybe like, oh, I'm a little feeling, you would say that sort of casually, but never would have said that with any seriousness. Like I feel depressed or and that was probably the only time that I might have said that. I may not have said it out loud, but I may have felt like that. So it was pretty serious for me. And it took a little like shock to the system to kind of get me out of it. And I was not easy to get along with during that period because I was sort of mad. And, every time Gideon would wake up in the middle of the night and cry, I'm just, and so, thankfully Kristen was eminently patient with me and forgiving and finally took a little bit. But that was a big thing for us as we kind of started the family. Now I feel much more adjusted to it. But even now I have to remind myself, okay, Kurt, there's no Saturday catch-up time.
Sure. Yes. This is now family time, right? It's different.
Yeah. And I have to be more intentional. I can't screw around as much at work because I don't have flex time to fix it,
Yes, kids will help us get very laser focused at work because there are so many activities we have to be available for after hours or weekends. And so it's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a good thing, right?
Laser focused and priorities driven, and you focused on what's your highest and best use of your time and what's really going to matter. Is this other thing really going to matter later? No, let it go. Let it go, delegate it, be okay with not getting it done because that's not going to matter. And this is. right? Our
Yes.
role as parents and our responsibility to raise good human beings who are well adjusted and happy, and it's the most important thing you could do.
Yes, amen. I totally agree with that. And Kurt, this is the one thing that we kind of spent a lot of time talking about when we connected, just about business. Is all of a sudden
Yeah.
we're asking each other about our families, and this was just really eye-opening to me. Right. As a therapist, as a mom of three, and we always talk about mothers and
Mhm.
Yes.
postpartum depression and what that's like. I used to coach moms all the time, in my private practice, and their husbands about
Mhm.
the warning signs of postpartum depression, especially if you're a mother having a baby in later years. And then when you were talking about like just kind of suffering in silence, like, oh my gosh, I did not expect to feel this way, because people had kind of set it up for me that this is going to be like the moment, like this
Right.
in love with your kid moment. You think you love your wife, but wait till you hold this baby and you're like, I'm waiting for it and I'm not feeling
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Well, and
You feel it, but
it was a different kind of,
Mhm.
it was kind of both at once, but the fact that I had resentment at the
Sure.
same time was really unexpected. And I just thought, I started saying to myself, well, maybe I'm not made to be a dad, or I'm just one of those people that kind of aloof about their kids or something, and which felt pretty crappy. And it
Yeah.
was encouraging to know, hey, I'm not the only one I'm not the only guy who's dealt with this. I had one guy said, and I feel like I'm going to ruin he was super articulate when he was, when I brought this up to him. He says, oh yes. He says, my metaphor for it, he says, as a man, as a woman, you give sort of almost part of your body to your children. You're carrying them for 9 months. You're making the baby, but as a man, you give them a little piece of your soul. And he said that was the
Oh,
way he looked at it. And it made sense to me when I was talking, because it felt like I was giving a little piece, something that wasn't going to come back,
mm,
that feeling of freedom. And like I said, all the guys I've talked to have come back to me and said, yes, like, thank you. And to your point, when we went through the whole pregnancy thing, our first pregnancy, you do pregnancy courses, you get these books. Everybody talks about postpartum depression. I read 2 books specifically written for men about what to expect during the whole pregnancy. And only one time did it talk about any sort of, I would say, kind of negative emotion I might go through about my children. There was some discussion of, okay, your wife might be, feeling pretty cruddy in this stage of the pregnancy, because everything's going on, which makes perfect sense. But the only thing they ever said was I might get jealous of my children because she's breastfeeding and I wasn't getting any chance to participate, kind of thing. And that was the most it said. And no one, and so that's why I thought it was me, and
sure.
me only, because even the guy books. And then of course, no one asks, because they come over, they see the baby, they want to see Kristen, which makes sense. All of that makes perfect sense. So it's been a little passion project on the side. I thought if I was going to do something else in addition to business, it would be to have some sort of pause to help inform people that this is a thing. And
Yes.
because I do think it is, because I found it to be in common across all the men I talked to, and at various levels of seriousness,
Sure.
and a lot of men like me are very freedom driven,
Mhm.
right? We love our independence. And so that's really what it hit. It's the feeling of, I don't have any freedom or control, which is
Mhm.
probably there's a greater sort of spiritual lesson there too. It's just this feeling like I'm running my life. I'm the boss of my life. I don't like anybody else tell me what to do. I don't, I'm building my business. I'm doing my thing. I'm making money. God plays his role. I stay in bounds. These kids are messing with that plan. It just kind of hits at the core. C.S. Lewis says in Mere Christianity, what the original sin is pride, right? Everything else comes
Yes.
from that, right? And so there's probably kind of a spiritual battle going on there too, because in one way to pride can show itself, certainly in me, is my desire to be like, I know what's important. And it's my
Yes.
thing, whatever it is. It's my
Right.
thing is most important. So, probably contributes to that kind of ongoing spiritual battle, I think, that we all deal with, fighting kind of our own selfishness and pride.
Yes. I know. It's tough. It's tough to surrender, right? Surrender your plan, and especially when in business, you have to be very orderly and on it when it comes to, the happenings of your operations, and watching over things, and then you add a child into the mix where it's like, "Oh, honey, I can't come to the office because Gideon has a fever." And it's like, "Well,
Right.
we were supposed to have this interview or this," right? Like
Yeah.
everything just gets like thrown out and up in the air.
Yeah. Well, and working together adds complexity to that too, because depending on what the meeting is, or depending on what the thing is, it's okay, you can cover. But we just had this with a nanny that called in last minute, and we had staff coming in from out of town. We had 3 all day long strategy sessions booked, and so yeah, it's like, well, how am I gonna?
Yeah.
We kind of are both needed at the same thing. But yeah, you make those adjustments.
Yeah. Well, Kristen, as you hear Kurt talk about this, and this was like 2 years ago, and then for the first time, kind of 4 years ago,
Mhm.
that he experienced this sort of like depressive episode when the kids were born. I mean, what comes to your mind? I mean, what was your experience of him at that time while you were postpartum?
Yeah, well, it hit more with our second child, as he said. Now, there was some of this funk I noticed when Eliana was born, but again, the timing of it, she was born the end of June of 2020. And so, we were in that lockdown phase with the pandemic, and we're figuring out how to manage our business. And there were so many other things happening that I didn't make the connection that it was related to that, because there were so many other external, stimuli
Sure.
happening. But definitely with the second one, as Kurt said, I'm so grateful for the wonderful foundation we have in our marriage and our relationship. And I think working together has just also forced that. We couldn't survive if we didn't have really good communication, if we didn't give each other a lot of grace, and not assume intent, which is such a huge thing when someone's
Mm,
having a bad day, right? I just don't read into those things. But as Kurt said, it did get really intense for it was not long lasting, but for a short period of time. And I was seeing things that were just out of character
mm,
for him and the man that I know he is. And so, and he himself didn't even know how to describe what's going on. Why am I feeling this way? What is happening? Kurt mentioned our faith. That's just been so important, because when you're seeking answers and you don't know, there's only so much you can do sometimes to ask the other person. They may not be able to describe it much themselves. You can seek counsel from people that are wiser than you, have more experience. But ultimately, for me, just being patient, trusting God, praying, and just trying to give him time and space, and just knowing who he is at his core, and that who he is in this moment is not, or what he's feeling or experiencing or expressing, is not reflective of who he is and his character. Um, so it was definitely like putting puzzle pieces together that I didn't really fully understand. And then once we did have that, more of that realization of this is what's going on, it's like, oh, okay, this is solvable, right? There is a way to get past this, and I can appreciate that. Um, and knowing, because again, men and women are different. Newsflash.
yes. Newsflash. Hello.
Newsflash. There's differences. And so, as he said, right, freedom, control. I mean, those are, if you ask, any man, right? Like, what really is
Yes.
going to get them. And you think about movies that really speak to them, and it's all about that, right? And so that can be a huge thing. And again, we were much later, so we were also very set in our ways.
Sure.
Yeah, it's I was thinking as she was talking that sort of the gateway into the pride I was talking about earlier. It was like a little seed that was planted in my mind that then grew. So I'm resentful and upset. I don't have any control and I can't do what I want to do. These are all things starting to circulate in my mind. It's my kid's fault. And then it's Kristen's fault. Well, why is it Kristen's fault? Well, I mean, she had the kid, I guess. It's sort of ridiculous. The train of thought that, the little seed of kind of, self-centered or kind of prideful feelings. As I've had time to think about it later on and sort of out of it, you can see how it's absurd, the conclusions that we come to in that thing. Because I wasn't just mad at my kids for, at Eliana and Gideon for needing me, right, and keeping me away, but I'm mad at Kristen because somehow that's her fault. Maybe because she's not doing all of it. She should be doing all the work or something. And it just sort of builds from there. And it's such a dangerous thing. And, being able to kind of talk about it and acknowledge it was good. And to find out, oh, okay, this is a thing. And also with the benefit of time, I kind of look back, and this is what I tell myself today. I think a lot about how I act so put out by having to serve. And, we have 2 children who are dependent on us for everything. Right.
Yes.
And so they need us to feed them. They need us to put them to bed. They're innocent. They can't be reasoned with on, oh, well, you should probably, you want a good night's sleep because that'll help you get up. You can't. And I am so put out by this, as if, like, this is so horrible. Like, I can't believe this. And I have taken some time recently to think and try to put myself, Scripture often talks about, Jesus will talk about us almost like we're his children. And I think,
yes,
boy, I'm so demanding. I've behaved that same way, right? I'm praying like, why isn't this happening the way and I talk to him like, I'm so upset that my children, I expect things, right? Well, Daddy, you made this for me yesterday. Why don't you have it for me today? These kids. But I behave so similarly. So I think that perspective's I've learned a lot about faith by sort of saying, you know what, that's kind of how I behave, right? I'm a gimme, I'm gimme, and I want what I want on my own timeline. And so that's what made me, just like I'm a toddler with God, with Jesus. I'm a toddler. Give me this. Why isn't this easy for me? Why isn't this client hiring me? Why are they so difficult? Why did this happen? Why is this in play? And I'm reminded, Kurt, that's kind of what you're so upset about and you're not innocent, right? You're not a 2-year-old who doesn't know any better.
Right. But our loving Father is so patient with us, right? And so forgiving and merciful. He's just kind of like half smiling at you, like, oh, Kurt, this is so cute. And so,
that's been kind of, it's given me a perspective I didn't have before I was a parent, right?
Yes.
That there's something that's happening here. And there's a good sort of metaphor for how we ought to behave.
Yes.
So that's been a blessing.
So tell me, was there kind of a point in this, dark period for you where something happened and you went, okay, either I have to go talk to someone, or the light bulb just came on and you're like, this is what this is? Do either of you remember just kind of the pinnacle at which you realized, oh, the reason I'm, grumpy and looking at things in a negative light and feeling resentful and angry is because of this,
Yeah. So I would say for me, there's kind of two moments. There was a moment when I kind of, I knew I needed to shake it off. I've been reading clearly too much C.S. Lewis recently because I keep
Love
thinking of him.
C.S. Lewis.
He talks about hell, and he imagines a scenario where all of our worst attributes as human beings keep getting worse and worse and worse. So we essentially create hell because there's the time in which we have to be increasingly more bitter or resentful of people or whatever that thing is, that it just sort of escalates until we've kind of created hell on our own. I use that metaphor because there was a moment in this whole experience when I was exposed to the fact that this was growing. This feeling of resentment and anger was growing to the point in which it was explosive. And there was kind of a very, like, one night when your typical parent night, right, where the kids, where Gideon's not doing what I wanted to do, sleep all night and don't make a sound, right? And I'm upset. Right. I have to get up. I don't want to get up. Maybe you should do it this time, but we're still kind of early. So I was still trying, in theory, to be the parent who gets up because Kristen needed to sleep, right? Because she's still breastfeeding and doing all that stuff. And I'm just mad. And I just lost my temper in a really kind of explosive way. And at that point, I saw, like C.S. Lewis described, like this is the accumulation of all this stuff. And now it didn't take 100 years. It took 4 months. And I thought, nope. Okay, so it was like that kind of moment when I was like, okay, this enough is enough. I've let myself kind of wallow in it. And that being said, I don't know that I fully appreciated all of it until much later, but that just sort of, I thought, okay, part of it is just making a decision that I love my kids. I can enjoy all of this stuff, not be upset about it, but still took a little time. I mean, even a few months before I've started to say to myself, I'm going to enjoy this thing, or and of course you get past some of the worst stuff, like he sleeps through the night now. So you get past some of that, but
yes.
And it may have taken, I think, a little more work. That was probably back in summertime of because he was born in 22. So it's probably late summer, early fall when I was feeling like this. And, it may have really taken even some time into 2023 until I fully recognize what I'm doing. Even in late 2024, I had a real moment when I felt like God was speaking to me about the fact that I still want to do things my way, So I think so much in our Christian life, I want to read a scripture or have a prayer and do a 180-degree turn overnight, but that's often not how. I'm stubborn and do things my own way. And so I think even until late 2023, I still feel like God needed to tell me, hey, there are other priorities in your life you're not doing because you have this, I'm trying to prove to the world I can be successful and make a lot of money and build a business. And it's awesome to say I started 12 companies or elected this many people. But in the end, it's not getting me anything in it. That's probably I still needed to hear that. And like everything in my life, I need a good slap across the face to hear it,
Don't we all? I want the billboard, the flashing lights, the message, right? Like, get it, Jordan, get it through your head.
Yeah.
And you guys, Kristen is just sitting here listening to her husband and smiling. And I know that smile, not because I know you, because this is the first time you and I have met, but that smile is just one of adoring, just adoration for your husband, because I can tell that you know his heart. He's a soft, kind, gentle guy, and what he's talking about sounds rough, right? It sounds like, whoa,
he is an absolute darling, and he is so supportive and is was wonderful. And yeah, like I said, it was very clear things out of character. And I do think all these years really prepared us for being able to have those conversations and be vulnerable and open. And not that I was a saint, you know, I don't want to act like that, because I'm sure I was probably less charitable at times. You're being a jerk.
Right.
I can't believe this. Who are you right now?
Sure.
But when those things happen, you just, yeah, trying to keep it in perspective is so important for both parties, right? In any kind of
Yes.
relationship when you're parenting. And, you know, I can't think of this woman's name. I wish I could remember, but she talked about when she's talking about where she is with her husband. We have not used this yet, but I thought it was great. They get home and she'll say, you know, they rate themselves 0 to 100. And she's like, I'm at an 80. And the other person's like, I'm at a 20. She's like, great, I'll cover you. You know, and
Yes,
we
Brene
haven't had that,
Brown.
but we have, thank you. Okay. We have that shorthand, you know, where, not that we use that exact language, but, we are a team. And so
Yes.
when you can go at it like that, which I love so much, your family meetings, your planning meetings, and, it's so important to keep that communication, going when these things happen. It's
Yes.
it's what saved us. Um,
Yeah, just tagging out and tagging in, right? It's like we are a
mhm.
team, and there's just some times where I need to step away. I mean, Josh and I have had some real shining moments with our kids in
Yeah.
frustration. I mean, you talked about that, but there is not a parent listening that could say, "Oh, that's never happened to me. I've never lost my cool, or I've never had a super dark thought about my child that like scared the hell out of me." I mean, it just
Yeah.
happens. And like you said, Kurt, it kind of creeps up on you and it just compiles. And then it can be scary to think like, who thinks like this? Or, you know, uh, like you said, feeling bad that you're even having the thoughts. So then wanting to kind of go inward even more and just maybe hide that from people or not expose that because you think I'm some sort of monster or something. What's going
Yeah.
on?
Yeah. Well, and that's what has become my quest is I think other guys just knowing what to expect, they didn't conclude like I did. There's something wrong with me, you know. Oh no, this is pretty normal. And it's been good to have a few of them come back and say, "Oh, I'm glad you said that." Because at first I thought you were crazy because everybody told me the opposite. And then, a month in or 2 months in, you start feeling this kind of, yeah, I don't have any independence anymore. And,
Yes.
and so it's been good and it's resolved in a great place. I've been, as much as I say things like I can't work on the weekends or in the evenings, I feel a little more joy every weekend to do now. They're still kids. It's just like, I think, well, maybe when they're 2 years older, they'll appreciate. I thought this was going to be more fun and they're bored with it. We took the kids strawberry picking. Ellie thought it was great. Our 2-year-old was bored out of his mind.
Yes.
And, and you think, okay, maybe that wasn't a great idea. We did the Disney World trip clearly too early. Just kind
Love
of
it.
what's going on here, but it's become more fun and we've been enjoying it. And somebody said, and I think this is true, we only have a few more years left where we're the center of their universe. And in about, 6 or 7 years, they'll be happy to get away from us and we'll be wishing they wanted to stay. So we've gotten to do that. And we've made an attempt to do more of it. We haven't gotten them involved in a million things and they're not doing sports and, music and gymnastics and all that. They're spending their time with us because frankly, that's what they want to do,
Yes. Listen to that and lean into it. I highly recommend you just hold off on sports for as long as you can. I mean, setting up play dates with other kids. It's what people do. So all the parents around you are going to be doing that. But if I could say anything, resist the urge. Like I just did an episode on our show with Dr. Leonard Sachs. He's a physician and a psychologist. So he has a double degree and he works with parents and children. And he said, cancel the play date and make a family date instead, because that bonding and that foundation building is so crucial. What they're going to get out on the soccer field when they're 4 or 5 or 6 is nothing in comparison to what you can give them if they're just, underfoot helping you unload the dishwasher on a Saturday morning, or sitting outside playing in the backyard while you're drinking a cup of coffee and visiting as a couple. I mean, this stuff is what matters. We've just got ourselves in this whole tailspin of running crazy with our kids. And then we wonder why they don't want to hang out with us when they're teenagers, why their peers matter more than their parents, and they're getting their advice from another 16-year-old when they're 16. That's crazy. Blind lead the blind.
Well, not just that, the overstimulation, right? And all of those things. And I was thinking about that again of like, okay, think about the influences that are surrounding, not that if they go to sports that it's bad, it's great to learn teamwork.
Sure.
There's plenty of time for that, but at a certain age, when you think about, and if you're working and you're away from home, or even us as we're working from home, I'm still going to my office, I'm not with them all during the day. And so how much time do you really have to influence and to really make those impactful memories? And so, who do you want raising your kids?
You're exactly right.
And again, as they get older, having those additional figures can be really helpful and supportive, assuming you have the right ones that are going to reinforce what you would want. But there's just, this is a very finite window. And you want them to have you as much as possible.
Yes.
During that time.
I call that the window of influence. And I just called myself out multiple times on our podcast about that and said, there was a time where all I was doing as a parent was providing 3 hots and a cot. 3 hot meals, a cot to sleep on. I throw you in the shower every night, or every other night, every 3 nights sometimes, and then get you up, send you out the door to school. And then here we are again at 6 o'clock at aftercare, picking them up and then doing the nightly routine. And like, no one was having fun. There was no quality time. I was barking out orders at them. They were scattering like cockroaches to every corner of the house except the one I needed them in, and it was just wait, what's happening? This window of influence we have is like 2 hours at night, and this is how we're spending it. And that rocked my world totally. And we actually, ended up just kind of contemplating different options. And so now I work from home, we homeschool, and it's just like this beautiful blend of, them getting the education they need, but also us being around them and having more, woven in family time in the middle of the day and in the morning time. And so I love that we have options, that once something like this hits us and we're going, oh my goodness, the window of influence is so small. There's just a bunch of different options that we can explore, and we're never stuck in one season for too long, right? We can just go, okay, well, that didn't work, or I like that, and let's try something different next season.
I love that. Yeah, the influence is so important. And this is where it was kind of funny. I tease myself, but I now am proud of it. This is where you take all the lessons you have on goal setting and all these things we do with our business. And I say, okay, I'm outcome focused. If I want my kids to learn this, be this, well, that's going to take some intentionality. So what does that look like? What's my plan? What books am I going to read? Who am I going to model? When we coach other people or other business owners or entrepreneurs just getting started, and they ask about what really matters, proximity matters, who you're around, find someone that you can model. And so I'm thinking about that even as, and I think about who my children might be around. Okay, well, let's think about who we're exposed to and who's in our circle so that we can be even intentional there. But I mean, I set goals and I have tasks related to these things, related to me being a good parent. And so it's been interesting, but my focus now on that is very much just like it would be in anything else. If I wanted to advance my career or anything, because if it's really that important, then it doesn't just happen that's what I'm realizing. This isn't going to just happen on its own. It's
Yes.
going to be because I'm intentional about it, and I'm saying, okay, I want this to occur, so I'm going to set up this, this, and this, or have these kind of boundaries or guardrails.
Yes, it's
So
Well, it's like she
necessary.
pivoted overnight from reading business books to reading kid books, and I learned all this stuff, and I get these messages. She's one of those, like, I like getting up early and working. She turns alive about 10:30, and then I start getting links. Well, this is the book. Watch this video. This is the person. So it's like overnight she became sort of an obsessive student on all this stuff, and started becoming even more important. First, it was all the like what to expect when you're expecting stuff, and then you start worrying about discipline and how to teach, and that's that became then the next priority.
What's harder than I thought it would be, Jordan?
Yes.
So much harder than I thought it would be. I thought, oh, this will be easy. And, I'm so grateful for my parents. I had great, great parents. And I just think, ooh, this is hard.
This is hard.
Yeah.
Because what is naturally what I want to do is sass back my time. Ridiculous. I mean, this is so ridiculous.
I know we have to be the parent in the room, even when we feel like we're 4 and we're tantruming or mantruming, it's like, oh, I forgot I'm in charge.
Yeah, something so minor would set me off, It's like, oh, for heaven's sakes, this is not a big deal.
Yes.
But yeah, it really is like, it takes tremendous discipline.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate so much what you're saying about business goals, right? If we're going to meet these metrics and reach these goals, we have to be intentional about proximity. Who are we hanging out with? Who are the 5 people we spend the most time with as business owners, right? And what are we doing on a weekly, a monthly, quarterly basis in order to meet these measurements? And I have found that parents just do not, and I never did either, think of family life in that same way. It's sort of like, you're human, you're a little human, I'm a big human, so I should just know how to kind of go about raising you. But then stuff starts getting wonky, and then you're reaching for like the quickest parenting hack, and you're blowing up Pinterest trying to find the one thing that's going to help your child that won't get out of his same tracksuit for 3 days straight, and it's like, how do I do this without like ripping his arm off when I take the thing off his head and throw it in the washer, But then that kind of goes down the wrong track too, because then we're just grasping at straws and we're picking something out of the air. And then if you're on social media or you're hanging out with your mom friends, if that didn't work, time 1 or time 2, then you're looking for the next thing. And so then you're trying another thing. And then all of a sudden we're down this road.
Opinions, and there's, all kinds of experts, they contradict each other. And, which is where modeling comes in. Okay, well, whoever's giving you this advice, what can you see? Can you see the proof in their children? If so, great. Try to copy what they're doing.
Yes. But also give it time, right? Before you throw the baby out with the bath. I mean, you got to just give that same positive discipline technique a good several months before you decide, well, that didn't work, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
Well,
yeah, I don't learn things the first time either, so I shouldn't expect our
Amen.
children's brains are being formed.
Yeah.
It's sort of silly how much training we expect an employee to go through for a relatively straightforward job. And then to your point, we just assume you're an adult, that's a kid, you know what to do. Same with our marriages, right? We just, premarital counseling was a little bit on the wane. People aren't doing that. That was an expectation with us. When we got married in the church, we had to do a premarital counseling session or a few with a pastor. I think most couples don't do any of that. And so there's this sort of underthought, well, you must know how to do it, or love is enough, or whatever. And those are probably the two of some of the most important things we do in society: pick our spouse and have a successful relationship, and then raise kids. And there's nothing.
No training.
I did get a little bit. We got the whole like, okay, here's what's going to happen in your pregnancy stuff. There's a ton of material about that.
Sure.
And then the parenting stuff is all sort of TikTok stuff,
Right.
And to your point, it's everybody says something different. Everybody says the other stuff is horrible and awful and will destroy your children if you try it even once. And I do think we were lucky in the sense that my parents probably did not have any sort of philosophy they pursued, but I thought they got one thing right, which overrode everything else, which was they were consistent, clear, and absolutely full of integrity. My parents were never don't smoke, but oh, by the way, I smoke, or don't do drugs, but I used to do drugs when I was a kid, or don't lie, cheat, steal, or do other things, but by the way, I do a little bit of that too. They were just absolutely consistent. So as a child, you didn't get the mixed messages. They did that really well. And my brother, speaking of modeling, my younger brother has 6 kids, and they're all wonderful, delightful kids. So every time I see them do anything, it's like, okay, I'm writing it down because that must be the right way to do it, because they did it. And one thing I appreciate about them is just sort of, you kind of watch them and it's this kind of chaos that they seem perfectly comfortable in, because they've got 6 kids, and they're all 5 of them are boys, right?
Awesome.
And so that's been
sweat the small stuff.
That's been helpful watching them. You know what? Boys will be boys. They're gonna tackle and jump around,
wrestle and
wrestle,
punch
and let's
each
not
other.
let's not freak out about it. So we have had some of the blessings of that, but that's why being a coach and providing coaching resources is so valuable. What you're doing, because where else do you get it? I mean, I do think some churches have that, but even on a large church like ours, I don't think they have anything specific for parents. They do, I think, have some stuff for financial peace, university, things like that, but it's not done the way you would think, it should be.
We need you.
Yes.
Thank you. The Thriving Family Accelerator has just been born out of my own struggles and my own pain with trying to do everything for everyone and kind of sidelining my husband in the process. And then having this realization, like you, Kurt, kind of looking back like, whoa, that's what I was doing. I thought what I was doing at the time was right by just taking everything over and kind of taking care of things and not, allowing my children the freedom to learn how to tie their shoes because I could do it faster and more efficiently and like we could get out the door. I thought that was just okay. And then it hits you and it's like, whoa, there's got to be a better way. And so, yeah, Josh and I, it's great to have a supportive spouse and I'm not always supportive of him. And so I'm glad for his grace and his forgiveness, but to work together to have a partnership in your marriage and in parenting is just, it's such a gift. It's such a gift.
It is. I have been reminded how much it's like running a business together. I feel like we got to have a business meeting about our children. Okay.
Yes.
There's so many decisions to make. I heard Tony and Sage Robbins say this at a seminar. They said, we learned that we can't just parent on the fly. They have a young child kind of late in life, and you can't just figure it out as you go. You sort of have to get separate and say, this is what I've been seeing. What have you been seeing?
Yes.
And because otherwise you end up with parent 1 does one thing, parent 2 does another. Because one of the things we run into is time for this sort of, I have a list of things I want to talk to about our children. And I'm looking at my schedule thinking, when are we going to do that? Because they're in the come down and want to sleep with mommy daddy phase, So,
oh yeah.
And so we're just trying to find time to say, okay, what are we going to do? We got school year's coming up. Where are we going to put them? Is it, and it's like you have to have like a business meeting. I thought we should have a retreat. We need to have a quarterly retreat.
Yes, we do this. My husband and I do this. I'm telling you, this is a real thing. We have like every 6 weeks we have
this.
Yeah, we go to a hotel right here in town. Once every 6 weeks we have a one night over, we get a suite. We go out early to dinner, like 4:00, and the only people eating are the retired folks.
That's right.
It's
That's right.
quiet. We can attend to each other. There's no distractions. There's going to be some intimacy happening. So you can kind of plan for that. It's like, whoa, that's a thing. You could actually make a
Yeah.
plan for that instead of
Yeah,
just doing that on the fly. I mean, really,
Yeah.
there's so many things that we can plan as parents and set up and make useful for us to be able to come back renewed and refreshed with an idea. Like seasonal planning, right? Is that quarterly getaway where you're like, okay, let's look at the next 3 months of our kids' lives and what's going on, and the seasons of the year, Christmas break, how long are they going to be out of school? Like, it just makes sense. But if nobody tells you, you just keep doing it on the fly. That's why I thought I'm getting on the airwaves. I'm getting out on the emails, on social media, however I can, to tell people there's a better way, and it's not as difficult as you might imagine. It's pretty simple if you just keep it going week to week.
Well, and by the way, how much more joy-filled are you when you're not caught off guard and reacting and doubting yourself and thinking, was that the right call, or what should I have done in that moment? And life will still be full of those things. But when you can have a plan and you feel locked in on how we're going to handle this, boy, your confidence is up, and that's going to just make you be more present in the moment. And so everything about that is better. You can really feel full of joy in those moments and fully experiencing what's happening, as opposed to, just trying to go through the motions or trying to respond and not even respond, react instead of respond. So
you got it. You said it. Yep.
And Kurt teased me because we're good about date nights and trying to get away as a couple so that we can, this is number one, even before the kids. So if this isn't good, that's not going to be good. And I did feel a little bit bad because I said to him, please don't read this the wrong way, but like, I know we're talking about a weekend away. I kind of want to just talk about the kids. We didn't do that. We did not do that, but
we did have a nice weekend away recently, and we had actually not done one just for us. We had gone to some conferences, which were super fun, and we did get a lot of renewal there, but we went to a couple where we had kind of almost like a joint vacation. Also fun, but not just the two of us. So we just drove up to Chicago because it's near Indianapolis, and it was the least planning required, right? No flights.
Exactly.
And that was worth it. And I think if we do need to do that a little more often. And we ended up talking about the kids, but it was fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Jordan can now give us pointers on how she sets up her seasonal planning. I will be in touch after this.
Absolutely.
Framework, and we will work that in.
We need a worksheet. We have a worksheet. We're killer. We're good doers.
I believe it. Y'all are very successful at business and family life, and clearly, weaving your faith into all of what you're doing, and that's so important. We just can't emphasize enough just the order of priorities, right? And God, spouse, and your children. And your career comes after that. And like you said, Kristen, you can have so much joy when you have order in your life like that, and you're prioritizing the right relationships, and your actions are lining up with the goals that you've set. It's like the most freedom and joy that you could even imagine in this lifetime. I mean, sometimes I just look at my husband, I'm like, should we feel guilty about this? Because this is good. Like, this is so good, And it's like,
I'm
no.
dreading going to the store, or all these things that just stress people out. And now again, as we said before we started recording with you, Jordan, we're only at age 4. So I reserve the right, we're awfully confident now, and I'm sure we'll get our butts kicked a few more times as they get older. But yeah.
Well, I've got an 18, 12, and a 10-year-old. And yes, the bigger they get, the bigger the problems, right? They have cars, they have the ability to drink alcohol or smoke cigarettes or all these things, I guess go into stores by themselves and shoplift or not. I mean, there's just a million things that they could do. If you have a solid foundation of safety and trust and openness, and you're meeting with your kids on a regular basis, showing up for them and and forgiving them and apologizing to them, those days are so much smoother than if you just would keep blocking and tackling and trying to, just grab a hack here or there. So I think you guys are setting an awesome trajectory for your family, for your marriage, your business. It's so exciting to hear you talk about passion projects and this fun little Dutchtown dairy bar, and then also shedding light for men on the reality of some of the emotional things you go through and the thoughts that you tell yourself and have come up. Like, it's kind of a blue ocean, Kurt. Like,
Yeah.
guys need to be aware of this, and women need for this to be on their radar, so that they can be supportive of one another. There's no judgment, shame. It's like, let's just support each other through this and make sure that, we get through on the other side together as a family.
Yeah.
Solid.
We're not the only ones who've gone through a change. Granted, It's
Exactly.
more obvious and you could argue more acute in many ways. But yeah, they're going through some stuff too. So
Absolutely. 100%. Well, guys, if you want to check out Kurt and Kristen Luidhardt, I just recommend you go to libertyspenders.com, because these folks are having fun. I can tell by the photos of you and your team, like your huge smiles, like people love working for you. I can just tell, and I haven't even met you in person. And then also just your story about taking over this fun little restaurant that you grew up going to, and you just get a real family feel and a down to earth feel for these folks who are making it big out there, even as parents and raising young kids. So thank you, Kristen and Kurt, for joining us on the Families of Character show. And I hope you jump into our Thriving Family Accelerator coaching. We would love to have you.
well, like you said, I love my ongoing education, so it's right up my alley.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Anything else you want to share before we jump off the airwaves and send this out?
Oh, I just think what you're doing is so important. So thank you for what you're doing and encouraging people, because it's desperately needed. And so when Kurt had shared that he had met you and had this conversation, I'm like, this is amazing. I need to meet this woman and hear more. So I think this is awesome. So glad you're offering it.
So good. I always will be. Where there's a will, there's a way. And I feel very much called to married couples and family life. And so we're going to keep the good fight going.
Please do.
Thank you. Thanks, Kristen and Kurt Luidhardt. Guys, I will catch you on another episode of the Families of Character show real soon. Stay tuned.